I'm delightfully honored to be here and seeing so much of an audience. Whenever people ask me what I do, I don't know if I'm seeing a lot of academicians around us. I'm one of those who starts talking for 3 hours non-stop. When you press my button, I will stop for 3 hours. But I will stick to my time and adjust myself to be within the 2 hours of period of time. And I'll divide my talk into two parts. One will be dedicated to what I do recently, and it will be kind of like introducing myself to the audience. The other will be a little bit of more delving into the details of one research area that I've been busy with for a while. I can use my mouse. Or here. Okay, as it has been introduced, this is a summary of my academic career. I really like the use of the picture of a maze. It was a maze for me. While I started studying mathematics, I loved mathematics. I still do love mathematics. But my intention was not to foresee a career in mathematics and going into the deep core fields of mathematics, but it was a period for me to enlighten myself. And I also believe in this philosophy as university standing, being an institution to enlighten people. But later on, I started teaching courses on sound and music, because I will explain in a little further in details. And I did my master's in sound art, sonic arts, at Middlesex, and further in 2012, media communications. That is to say, mathematics, arts, and philosophy. In terms of the philosophy, my PhD was on more modern philosophy, Heidegger, after 50s philosophy and technology. So when I was a little boy, like this, that's me in the picture. I was grown up with playing computer games, and this little computer indeed has a big role in my career, which is called Commodore 64. As the number would tell, it was capable of using only 64 kilobytes. I wonder what you can do for 64 kilobytes these days, but people were doing amazing things, and I was a heavy computer gamer. I'm teaching a course called, for instance, physical computing, and I'm teaching my students to break things into parts and do rather sophisticated things, or things that will satisfy their demands. So, talking about the passion about my music story, while I was attending university at the third year, I started playing with this band called Replicas. We had no audience, zero audience, and then while we were playing our own songs to the audience, and that was a time when in every other bars and clubs, people were playing songs by other peoples, like, the ones you will see on the TVs. They were doing the cover songs. But we were so stubborn and so ambitious to play our own songs, and it just worked out fine. And we released our first album in 2000, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We released 8 albums in the past. And it also brought up my career, being an academician. I'm teaching courses on sound and music, but not in a sense of like a conservatoire style of teaching how to make music, but using music as an expressive way with the use of technological means. And I will discuss about it in the further slides. So these are kind of the courses I teach at the university, Sabancı University. The first course, Sound and Image, was the very first course I started teaching. So it's kind of like how you combine sound and images together. So I'm teaching for a program called Visual Arts, which has nothing to do with audio indeed, but that's an umbrella term. So sound is very essential, and it has a crucial role in enriching your experiences in your arts and design, obviously. So I'm also teaching these other courses, and I'm going to be showing you some examples from just one course, because otherwise it will take a lot of time, this creative coding in particular. So the creative coding course, I've been teaching this, I started teaching this in 2017, I think. And it's a course that explores coding as a conceptual level with the aim of using computation as an expressive and creative tool. And it addresses topics such as generative audiovisuals, computational art, scripting for common media tools. And I think you have some common courses as such. So that was 2017 when we started. And so these are the very first examples of my students' outcomes. The first assignment could be the second, though, I don't remember, is the magic moment where they understand the computer can do the for loop. And then you, within a simple geometry and with some little manipulations, you can create amazingly complex and neat geometries. And so these were the first steps. So the structure at our program, the Visual Arts and Communication Design, it's an interdisciplinary class where indeed I think there are 24 students enrolling into a class. I never ask their field of study. So this is not a must course, it's an elective course. Some of them are engineers, some of them are artists, some of them are coming from business administration. It's a totally interdisciplinary course with no background required. Even they're not required to have any computer programming background. But I mean, using computer programming could give you a skill, but I'm more interested in the content and the discourse. This is why I tried to divert their interest into something more important, which is the futurism, if you're aware. Like this is an art movement which is more famous as its name as Italian futurism at the beginning of the 20th century. But as you can see, for instance, this is a depiction by Giacomo Balla when they invented the photography, and there was this notion of motion. That was the explosion of trains, cars. The world was going into like industrialization. Everything was in huge movement. And the painters, of course, they were influenced by these motions and trying to depict these movements in their paintings. So you can see, this is a painting from 100 years ago, but you can clearly see that there are some like repetitions and patterns that are kind of like the baby steps of what we're observing today. And I wanted to show them that what you're doing today is not new at all. So there's an ancestor behind. But what can we do with it? Whether we can go back to 100 years ago and then kind of like get influenced by this futurism and create something new. And we created an exhibition at the end, and I'll show you a video of it later on. Or let me... Is this a video? No, I will show it later on. So for instance, this is a work by a student called Jansu. The painting on your left is a 100 years ago painting, and the right is it's not a Photoshop editing, nothing at all. It's code manipulation within an environment called processing. Maybe you might have been aware. Jansu was a computer scientist student. She continues her career as a sound artist now. I know her. So this is another depictions or like influenced artworks. This is Cem Tunaboylu. Cem was another computer scientist. I don't know what Cem is into, but this is his own influence, I would say. Hava Neslihan Sümer, she's an artist, has no background in computer programming, but this is a painting by, I think, again, Giacomo Balla. So we were able to like get some parts of it and then manipulated. As you can see, there are certainly lots of for loops and randomization and a lot of things. İpek was excellent in her figure of drawing. She was not an artist either. She was a computer scientist, and as far as I know, she's doing her master's in Netherlands on artificial intelligence. But this is a nice opportunity where I can get all these students together, and I never ask who is dealing with what. So she is, even might be quite a little bit more talented than our artists to a certain degree, but never had a chance to reflect her artistic expressions in any classes where she attended. But in this class, she was able to do that. But which gained huge interest. This is a website, acknowledged website. If you don't know, I'll recommend you take a note. Creative Applications. We were listed there. This exhibition gained attention from the creative community, the Recipher, Generative Arts exhibition. And I also published a paper on this and tried to signify, underline, let's say, the futurism art and its significance to computational generative art. And I presented this that was in Italy, I think, as part of the Generative Arts Conference. Very fruitful. And a year passed, 2018. I had another batch of students. At that time, we were lucky to have an exhibition in Istanbul, which was about the Russian avant-garde. If you're unfamiliar with, these are the Russian avant-garde works you might be observing. They were the ancestors of today's, I think that they were just before the Bauhaus of graphic design or today's contemporary graphic design. I mean, you can see that they have a potential as well to marry them with the content as well, creative coding. And this is how we ended up. So these are the works, like, again, Naznehir Bektaş. She was a computer scientist. This is not a model. This is, again, a coding-generated processing only result. Again, an artist, student, designer indeed. I must separate the distinction. Emir is a designer who's following his career as a designer. But there is one thing to certainly, I have to underline the difference. Some of you might be involved in the coding. You can do this in a linear editing environment like After Effects or Premiere, which is obviously can be done. But when you are coding these things, you are kind of like giving a different impression and feeling of temporality. Because randomness comes into play, temporality meaning there's no beginning, there's no ending. It lasts for eternal time unless you unplug the device. So this is another substance level of creativity that is added to their core artistic notion. Another work by Berg, we were looking at this painting by Lisitsky, not only looking at the painting, but trying to analyze a painting. And at that time, when you're analyzing a painting, you go into the deeper details. Like, for instance, yes, these are random. These might seem like a random generated iterations of the Lisitsky painting, but it is not indeed. There's a little bit of smartness in the algorithm. For instance, this red dot isn't as much duplicated as you can see, because we wanted to limit. We wanted not full independency, but still to be in line with what Lisitsky was foreseeing. So this is a nice moment where my student and me were looking in deeper into the analyzing the painting from a different perspective. This is again from Russian conservatism. Again, Kandinsky paintings. Again, some reiterations of the painting. And then the pandemic, 2020. I didn't teach this class. This is the latest results. This is the third time I've been teaching the class, 2021. Last semester, indeed. But this time we went into something different. Indeed, this was in my agenda, but I was so anxious to wait for it because I needed to gather more insight and information, because I respect a lot this field, which is the geometric patterns. To be more precise, from the country that I'm coming from, I can name it as Islamic geometric patterns. And they are the super abstract forms of arts, as you might tell. But this time, you're looking at the same class again, no repetition, but this is again the same class, creative coding. But I want to give my students such a feeling that you can start doing things with hand. So these are the first assignments. They do these with the rulers and compass, like they did so many years ago. And then you realize how incapable you are in creating abstract forms. So these are the first assignments. And when you tessellate things might not like coincide well. But it's also another nice moment where so many of my students are stuck up with using computers, looking at screens all the time. It was a kind of like freedom for them to use their hands only, cutting papers and using pens, like sort of like freedom. And I heard from them saying, this is an amazing time because I'm away from Photoshop and Illustrator. I'm using my hands. So it's, again, another enthusiasm for them. And then later, they start doing these things in a vector-based environment called Illustrator, you might be familiar with. I mean, you could do these things in Illustrator, but there are smart ways of doing it. It's because, I mean, just forget about the motif. I'm giving them the tessellation, which is on your left. You have to find out the building block. So just by looking at the pattern, you have to start thinking about where to begin. What is repeating in this block? So then you might realize that this motif could be the repeating block, and then create these tessellations. So this is the second step. But the third step is obviously the coding. This is the core of the class. But when you're trying to code this structure, you have to make a mathematical analysis. Not rocket science, very basic and very easy ones though. And when you're looking at Islamic geometric patterns, they usually use degrees of 60, or like they use multiples of 6, 4, 8, sometimes 5 and 10. So then you can have some assumptions like saying, okay, so if this is 60, the thickness, if I make a parameter here like A, this is 2A, 2A, 2A, and then you end up with finding these vertex points. Okay, very simple geometrical analysis, just a high school analysis. And then you can make different tessellations. This is not the result of that one, but I will show you, because just by looking at this, maybe we can play this for a moment. What's the building block? It's very difficult to look at it, right? It's hard. And this is amazing. But I also must admit, this is a traditional art. But I exclude the spirituality for the sake of not for the sake of being secular and having a secular discussion in the class. Because there's a huge tradition I do respect. We can go into the discussions of it, but the first starting moment should be the abstraction of it. Then later on, when you are happy with it, like going into the details, you realize the spirituality and then the means of these patterns in further details. That's the amazing part of it. So this is the motif. I can go rewind. If this is the shape, let's assume this is the motif, could be the motif. We could repeat this. Then if we do the mathematical analysis, seems like this could be the constructive element. And then we come up with all these parameters and the vertices. And then we do the coding. We write the if you're familiar with the processing environment, this is not super complicated. Though it might sound to you, when you're looking at the first sight, it might seem super complicated. It is not, believe me, it is not. It's, of course, a learning procedure. And my students, coming from various backgrounds, arts, design, no background in computer programming, they can handle that. And then you realize when you are doing the tessellation, you have to do another type of an analysis, because when you're adding this piece right next to the other one, it is not like, you have to come up with, if you are accepting a certain ratio as R, what is the displacement of it in terms of R in the horizontal and the vertical dimension? You have to calculate those things as well. It's a bit like you're solving a puzzle. It's very entertaining. I really enjoyed it. My students loved it. And these are the tessellation results. And this is the tessellation. And at the end we did an exhibition, but unfortunately I don't have super nice photos. These are the renderings. But there is one thing crucial. Yes, you can do these patterns. So every student were given a pattern by random. So, all the patterns have different difficulty levels. I'm aware. I said, I can't give you the same pattern, otherwise it will be very boring. Every student has a different pattern. They have to solve the puzzle, find the formula, and write the code. And it is not about exhibiting this thing. It's also exhibiting the code. So the code itself is an art. So they should be writing their code in such a neat way that shouldn't be like gibberish. So everyone who is about to read a certain degree of coding should look at it and understand it, okay? If you're into like writing code, you can tell how a math code looks like. So I told them, the code you're writing will be an art piece as well. So we will be exhibiting them. That was a crucial touch for the exhibition. But I can show you some examples of the results. Some of them were eager to put some more like colors into their things. So these are my students' results, by the way. So you can follow their thinking through their workflow of how they structured, like broke the piece into their constituent parts. I can share the slides, by the way, if you feel like we can do all the contact. But it's amazing. Like, for instance, this thing is the constituting part is just a simple this sign. And with use of this, you can make such sophisticated things. This is the beauty of the computers, and people of the time have been aware of it, but they weren't aware of the thing called computer, but they were aware of the thing called algorithms, I think. Anyway, so that was the course, the one of the courses I've been teaching. So let me, to save the time efficiently, go and tell you about what I do as an artist. I have a website you can check out, but I'm going to present you some of the latest examples. But before going into that, perhaps I might be very quick in explaining. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. I'll be very happy to be like interactive in that sense. If you want, you can ask right ahead or just feel free, okay? So the arts. I'm going to present a few works of mine. So this is a piece called Variable. I think I've done this in 2017 or 18, I can't remember well. This is a documentation of the piece. Obviously, I'm not very satisfied about presenting a video of it. I wish I could have brought the piece and presented to you. I'll do my best to explain it. But since the audience is into like arts and design, I'll also open my kitchen and explain the logic behind it, how the functionality and how I did it. So this piece is using machine learning. If you have been aware of have been familiar with the term. So there is a machine learning behind the system. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different computers residing under this facade. And with the machine learning, I trained the system to generate phrases, semantic phrases of a certain 6 sentences long, I think, from a text by Heidegger. Heidegger has a book called Being and Time, which is based on ontological, a lot of philosophical discussions. Very heavy book. I read it once, but I don't think I understood it. I have to read a couple many times to go into it. But that was my inspiration. The idea is the piece is a variable piece. The name changes, and the artistic content, the statement also changes as well. And the whole thing over here, which will be impossible for me to show you, is like with this 6-7 sentences long, is generated from the Heidegger's text called Zeit und Zeit, Being and Time. And the names always change. The ontological findings change according to the title. So this statement changes according to the notions of acceptedness. And there are different iterations. I don't know whatever comes next, but like decision, 8 long phrases. And there were people from the audience came to me, and I like that. I mean, I think the art is all about these discussions, and telling me we didn't understand it. And I said, fine, I didn't either. That's the idea. That's the idea. Sometimes art makes you feel full, and I'm criticizing this. Sometimes you look at an art, and there's a heavy, long statement, which is, I believe, sometimes in terms of its art value, doesn't satisfy me at all. So this is kind of like was a criticism against it. So the piece can change, the whole thing can vary, and that doesn't matter much. So the whole piece is about not being standing as a high art, but it's indeed a bit like criticizing the issues of high art. Okay? Yeah.
Did you program the words that would appear there?
Good question. Indeed, I have listed down 30 many, I think, 8 word long, these things. And then machine learning algorithm was generating me 6 sentence long phrases, mostly using the word being, since the book was about being and time. And I was replacing the being with the decision, for instance, in this case. So the ontological findings were about being, were replaced, and they were sounding as if they were talking about decisions. But answering your question, I chose those words. Just the general phrases, as I said, kind of like has irony behind it, having some criticism as well with machine learning, because that was a time, I think today we can also discuss about it. People will always think that when you make art with artificial intelligence, it's very cool, but I don't think that's very cool at all. Because if you know the logic behind it, it's just an imitation of what a human can do. Strange music. This is the piece I did in Berlin. Was invited for a festival called Dystopia Sound Art, first time in 2018. So the idea was about a dystopia. Then I started thinking of what could be a dystopia in terms of like sound. Then I thought to myself, what if music disappears on Earth? Each of us, imagine that's a fantasy though, we forget about music. There's nothing called music on Earth. Nothing musical, nothing. For some strange reason, we never know. That's the fantasy. So then my fantasy has a fact to a certain degree, because this is a true part of the story. In 1976, I think, I'm not sure about the date, 77 maybe, there was a shuttle sent to space, which brought some worldly civilization items, like different sorts, like paintings and this and that, but 6 different records as well, music, sound, and this and that. which contained music by Bach, Beethoven, some I don't know, some jazz musicians as well. Then I thought to myself, this is true by the way, let's fantasize. The music disappeared. All of a sudden, by excavation, by chance, some archaeologists discovered that, hey, there's something called music. How we will find it out? And then they discovered there was a shuttle sent. So then they went to find the shuttle. So they find the shuttle and bring back the music and try to generate and understand the music. So this was my fantasy. So I built a system. So this is working on an artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence system is looking at the corpus of this music by Bach, Beethoven, all the music that I was able to quantify, because they have to be quantifiable for an artificial intelligence system to reiterate and regenerate. So the system was generating new music out of that corpus. But it's also showing you the notations and this and that. The idea is humans are learning from machines. It's a bit like we're learning what was missing on Earth. The music was gone. And I also wrote a paper on this, and I was presenting at the conference, and somebody asked me a question, how do you feel about the music that's composed by the system? And I said, no, not that fancy. I mean, I don't think they're I mean, I'm not proud of the music they're doing. This is a bit like, again, the same criticism, because I don't know if you heard, I think it was Sony, they released a song composed by artificial intelligence that sounds like Beatles. For those who don't know much about Beatles, thought that's an amazing Beatles song. For those who adored Beatles, they said that's a horrible Beatles song. So that's the thing. So when you're looking at an art piece, consider the same thing. If it's so sophisticated, and if people are saying this is there's artificial intelligence behind it, or so many computers and this and that, don't buy that shit, okay? Just look at it from the core of it. Like, if you consider this as an art, it's an art, no matter what the dimensions are. I mean, I'm not very interested in how it is made. I'm more interested in what I see, okay? This is, again, another criticism against that attitude. I don't fancy the idea of like making the technology superior to that degree. So these are the latest pieces I've been doing. As you can see, has a lot to do with what I was teaching. I've been this time not only they stand as static images, but they animate because they are parameterized, meaning I can animate them. Question?
I have a question.
Sure.
Reviews.
Uh-huh.
Works. I want to know if you designed the artificial intelligence, or did you use an already existing artificial intelligence?
For the machine learning, I use the Markov chain algorithm with some Python library that I'm not very certain of, but if you're interested, I can find, but I think it should be outdated at the moment. The other one was TensorFlow, but CNN. What is it, CNN? It's again artificial intelligence workflow.
What was the process of feeding the artificial intelligence? Did you feed everything at once, or you have to be like feeding it with data, like slowly?
Good question. I fed the system with the existing metadata that I gathered from these recordings. Not all of them, as I said, like Beethoven, Bach, some other jazz, I can't remember the titles, Beatles, this and that. I was able to find the metadata, gave it to the system. Then I thought to myself, why don't I also enrich the pool? Whenever the system generates a new song, it's also added to the system. So it's kind of like getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's becoming more boring.
But in a way, self-sufficient.
It does. there are 6 computers. Not to go into the further details, like using Raspberry Pis. They're very simple ones. I can't rely on their computational power. Within every 15 minutes, they were generating a new song. It was taking 15 minutes for them to regenerate a new song. But yeah, that was the tool I had, and everything worked fine. My pleasure. Yeah, going back to these. So these are, again, Islamic geometric patterns, not now moving in different dimensions, like having these... I mean, I like this idea of... I never had the intention of designing these like that. I program and see whether it works fine. It's kind of like, I call it dialectic in creativity. I play it with it, and the system answers me back. If I'm happy, okay, then I change a little bit of it, and then they come up with some results. And then that was when the NFT thing was all around the world. And I also released a few NFTs of it, not few, 20. And some of them were sold out. But I'm not saying I made a huge amount of money, because I'm more on the clean NFT side, if you're familiar with. That's another discussion if you feel like talking. But I'll show other examples of the NFTs in that sense. So these are 2D, two-dimensional works I've done in P5GS, by the way, if you're interested in the computational side of it. You could also do these things with the processing, doesn't matter, but for those who are curious to know. And this is already being exhibited in Istanbul. First time I exhibited them in Milan. So this is the first time that I was able to exhibit them. So this is an exhibition still going on in Istanbul. This is a piece where I change a little bit of aesthetical attitude, now having 3D dimensional substance. Again, not going into too much of technical detail, but this is programmed in C++ in open frameworks. But this is more having the 3D dimensional substance, and it is being exhibited again in another city in Turkey, in Ankara. At the moment, it's on exhibition. I'm fast forwarding to save some time. These ones, they don't have randomness. Yes, these ones, they don't have... I kind of like enjoy the harmony. If there would be any randomness, I would prefer to have Perlin noise, for instance, to give it a more of an organic feeling. But I just don't want to be too far away from the idea of it. Like, still, I do like the tiling feeling, having them togetherness, repetition. That's why I think I wanted to keep this. This is a video. It has an ending of beginning, but the code, since this is going to be exhibited as an NFT, if you're familiar with it, NFT websites are supporting videos, unfortunately. Some of the NFT websites are supporting JavaScripts, but this was done in C++. NFTs, just I think it will come and go. So I think if I were to exhibit this, I will rather run the code and let it have no temporal relation at all. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
It's maybe more a personal question.
Yeah.
Or philosophical question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Because this reminds me, I think that you said that like to the more Islamic geometric
Patterns.
patterns. And I don't know if you're a religious person or not, but I don't know, could this be like an interpretation of all these like patterns that you see maybe in the mosque? Or maybe like, I'm thinking that with the way like
Yeah.
Yes, but
Hard talk.
yes, but like with programming and like this universal code, like could be like an interpretation or an abstract way of thinking, like connecting, no, with your art to that God.
Uh-huh. Well, you need a very hard question though, but yes, yes. There are certain layers of dimensions. Let me not run out of time as well. For instance, religion is, I don't know your culture well, but from the country I'm arriving from, is kind of like boiling soup. The Islam issue is, I'm not a religious person to start with. I am not a practitioner religious person, I would say. But I do respect in all sorts. But while I was introducing this topic to my students, I was kind of like hesitating not to go into personal matters because I like the idea of the secularist approach. But to a degree, I like the feeling of empathy. At least we should feel this approach so that we respect the other. Then I started feeling the empathy of the attitude of these artists. Why are they using this abstraction to reach the God? There are certain discussions, by the way. One discussion is still also you can doubt it. There are other people who would say wrong. Islam avoided the depiction of the figure, and which was a nice decision, I think. In the mosques, I feel more quietness, calmness, and richness. Just a personal comparison. Sometimes I find churches very dark and heavy, chaotic sometimes. Not to say which one is better, and that's my personal approach. But I think that was a nice, clever idea if it's true. And of course, the main intention was not to make a person icon, so that they will consider the prophet of the Muslims as a superior person. So I do respect those things. Like I'm talking on the side of the empathy again. So in those respects, I believe this art is telling us too much, a lot of things about finding. It's hard. It's very hard for me. Like the beauty or the abstractionness or the absoluteness in the geometry. But this was also told by the Greek philosophers as well, like the Plato was saying, where we can't see the abstract world in the world. It's just a mere reflection. So that can only reside elsewhere. So I mean, you can think of it like also might resemble the discussion of how you can believe the representation of God as well. And most of the religions, they also approach it from a more like an anthropomorphical point of view. We all believe that God has a personality, though it might not. So there are all these other dimensions. But I would love to discuss it later on. Okay? Sorry, I'm too much to talk, but okay. I hope that answers to a certain degree, at least satisfies for the moment. So again, this is another piece I did, but this time I started to think like rather than creating a harmony, but just with this simple shape, I can make chaotic things. So with an order, can you make a chaos? So this is a piece again currently exhibited at Istanbul. So the whole simplicity makes a dizziness and creates a noisy structure. Though I didn't make it to look like noisy. The system, they get enlarged and then they become noisy and glitchy.
It's interesting how the more you watch it, the more patterns do start.
Emerge, right?
Yeah.
So these thick things. They look like organic, I don't know, like caterpillars moving here and there.
Did you think of that?
Not really. I mean, I can tell you the fact is there are 1, 2, 3 rectangles over here. You can see. Nothing fancy. No sophisticated mathematics at all. Just symmetry. But when you upscale them, but not upscale them according, how to say, equally, one side gets thicker. So they're elongated towards, it depends on where you're looking at, one dimension, but not on the other dimension. So if it's not elongating as equally, so they get thicker. So then I realized, that was by chance, by the way, I realized I started seeing these white, small, whatever you name it, insects. And then I said, oh, they're animating beautifully and creating all these amazing, unexpected visuals. That was unforeseen. I mean, that's the beauty of the coding, I think. And yeah, this is the NFT website I was using. Now it was Hiketnung, if you are familiar with. Now they shut down and name has changed, Teya. I usually publish 5 editions. Should I be proud? I know so many of them are sold out. I like it. Not to say that I'm kind of like legitimizing my efforts of getting this culture, this established history in the past, and putting it today in front of the audience, and then it's accepted by the masses. And I'm not proud of the money I'm making. It's nothing in it, but I'm proud of the acceptance of it. Yes.
When you sell this NFT, you give the owner the code when he buys?
No, they deliver the NFT only. The video in that case. On that.
The video have an end, but if he have the code,
Yeah.
and
If you were to ask me, I wouldn't buy, because I would go to the author and ask for the code instead, because I think they lack the high quality as well. They are MPEG-4, H.264, but in terms of the quality, they're so weak. That's something that I would criticize the NFTs. But obviously, isn't it like most of the people who are buying the NFTs are buying to sell them? So I can give you some examples. Like a few of my works, I'm selling for 1 tezos, which is $5, nothing. And I've been observing that the ones who owned them started selling them at 10 tezos. So they are trying to make money out of my works. That's the effort behind it. So I don't think that they're much interested in like seeing the code or anything like that.
no, because I think in the other example, expose the artwork
Uh-huh.
and the code like another artwork, and I think maybe in NFT you put the video, but the coding with him.
Exactly. I'm not in favor of the NFTs. It's just I think it will be come and go. That's what I believe. The next thing I'm presenting is in the OpenSea. Some people might criticize, hey, this is not clean NFT. No, it is, because I'm on the Polygon network. The Ethereum network is wasting so much energy, just to remind you. This is a bit like driving an old American car with like heavy loads of gas. We're not living at that time, I think. We as artists should respect. Money doesn't matter. We should respect the earth first. And this is an exhibition. I'm an advisor, and I was an advisor for the selection of the NFT pieces. So I'm going to present you some works of the NFTs of some talented Turkish artists. Tolga Tarhan, he's living in New York, I think. So these are, again, currently being exhibited in Istanbul in an NFT exhibition. And last, I think I'm kind of like short in my time, but I'll do my best to catch up. This is the music project that I'm in. So I told you I was playing with a rock band for a while, releasing so many albums, but we disbanded. But music is something that you can't get rid of, and I'm doing this project since 5 years or 6 years, I don't know. We are a duo, live coding on stage, creating audiovisual performances, and I'll do a workshop here in 2 days on Thursday, I think, right? Yes. So let me introduce you what I do, and I will be presenting it during the workshop as well, but might be a promotion for you to come to that presentation as well. And there's an album. This is from we have a Sonar Istanbul. This is a show we did in Sonar. They have a huge LED wall. They call it whale screen because it's the size of a whale, that big, and you will see. So we present the code. We improvise with the coding to generate musical phrases. We use the algorithms to generate music. It's similar thing to what I did with the audio visuals. I do it for the sound as well. Again, you will see some visuals too. Visuals have been code-generated too. So we're not using any third-party application. We have created everything of our own use. And yeah, this is the album we released. And yeah, this is the first part of the talk. Thank you. So that was 2011 when I did my first solo exhibition. I presented three different artworks. This was one of them, and all of them were sold to prestigious collections. One of the works that was sold, called Languageless, was an interactive piece I programmed in ActionScript Flash. If you ever heard or have any experience, it's not gone now. And the collectors, I was at the time again affiliated with the gallery, so the gallery was in intermediary between me and the collectors. I told the gallery people that this is an application running. We should have a running computer and give it to the collector with, like, let's say auto-run, whatever, just plug in. Because when your artwork is in a collection, you have to guarantee that within so many time, like 100 many time, I won't survive, I guess. But the artwork should remain. And I thought to myself, electricity will remain, I think. Otherwise, some energy transformation could turn into electricity, but this computer can run. But I couldn't convince my gallery, and I couldn't convince the collectors as well. Then I realized they don't know what they're dealing with. I'm doing some work related with coding and technology, and these people are galleries and collectors. They don't know what they're paying for. They don't know what they're dealing with. Then I thought to myself, this is a deadlock for this future of this art, because I'm going to give this piece to them in 6 years of time, 10 years of time. They will call me back if I'm still alive and tell me that this is not working. That will be obvious. But it is not. I mean, this is quite a common issue, right? We all are losing our photographs. Some cell phones are becoming outdated. We're losing hard disks and that. But that's agreeable. I mean, that's acceptable. But when you're giving your artwork to a collection, that's a cultural property, like has a cultural connotation. It has to remain. Then I felt the responsibility of going into this and questioning. But after some many years, I started thinking about this. I realized none of the galleries, but by the way, this is a global situation. And believe me, like all the prestigious galleries, they don't have any like exact answers for that. So the obvious situation is, as with all components that contain technology in today's art, there are various concerns and question marks in terms of carrying technological works of art to the future, as I underlined. I mean, conservation has been done for painting, which is nothing too different though. Like they have to maintain the color, the dye. Again, that could also be named as a technological artifact. There are educational systems, like there's a discipline, there's a tradition, there are schools, but technological art conservation is a different has a different substance. Then I looked at how the conservation is defined by this is an ICOM, International Committee of Museums, I think. But usually all the definitions are mainly based on the preservation of the physical means. But technological art sometimes might not have any physical means at all. They can be digital. I'm using the term technological arts. I think that's more of an enlarged umbrella term that covers the digital art as well. Digital art is, doesn't encompass or like kinetic art, but I think technological art gives it a better phrasing. So according to Marches, any conservation strategy for digital artworks should deal with the issues associated with the continuous maintenance, the short-lived qualities of such works, like, for instance, like the issue of, as I said, the action script thing. That piece, I was called from an exhibition in Milan, again, Italy, to exhibit the same piece. Then I discovered that the piece doesn't work because Flash doesn't work. The algorithm doesn't work, and I needed to make a restoration to my piece and rewrite the whole code in another programming environment, C++ this time. So then continuous maintenance might be an idea, but I'm not here to give you the exact answers for this, but just to underline that there's an issue. And the discontinuity of technological components on which they are based. For instance, not only the software platforms are disappearing, sometimes the VHS players are gone. You know, like all these media players are gone, films are gone. The inevitability of evolving size and diversity in a museum collection requires sustained efforts of conservation. And museums, when they're getting all these collections in their conservation strategy, they are increasing like their responsibility, and I realize that they're not aware of this responsibility at all. As I told you, like you can give it a lot of definitions: digital art, media, electronic art, internet art. They have both cross sections, different names, and I came up with the idea, and I started looking for a place to buy, and I realized selling train rails is forbidden, because they were owned by the government, the state. They're products of state, whatever. The state owns them. It's forbidden. I was calling all these places, and they were talking in a weird manner, like, where did you get our phone from, you know? But there are these people who are still selling, and I was able to find one, and online and this and that, and then send them from a long distance to the exhibition space. And I used two of them in one section, so then they're 12 meters long. That was a huge piece. They're real. But I don't think they're from the Turkish rail company. I think they're from Ukrainian rail company, because they are sold to be used for recycling. Because they melt them and they make razors, I don't know, whatever they do. They have an economical value. They're 100 kilos, they're heavy. The idea was simple than making it. Anyway, So the technological loss presents a grave danger to technological art. That's the issue. So you remember these TVs? They're gone as well. So these are the CRT TVs, but there were arts based on these things, right? Now they were replaced by these plasma LCDs and OLEDs. But if you know the artist, Namjoon Paik, he uses those TVs to make these sculptural, think of it like changing this TV with an LCD. It will look so absurd, wouldn't it? So then I think this whole shape is part of the whole idea. It has a substantial role in the aesthetics of this artwork. So then what happens if this is another different piece, but owned by, can't remember, but the curators have decided to, when they were having this collection in their collection, have multiples of these TVs, multiples of these devices, multiples of these hardwares, so that they can maintain the piece. Otherwise, if you were to replace this with an LCD, it will look horrible. Look at this one. For instance, this was a piece made in 1979 by Miguel Angel Cardenas, could be. And then years after, they presented as this. But you might think that it was a decision made by the creator, but not really. It was a decision made by the artist. So then, should we let the artist make a decision? Was it appropriate to follow the artist's wishes and to use the contemporary flat screens, giving the work a present day feel? I'm not sure. I don't know whether you liked it, or should we have strived for a version that will have assumed the appearance of historical work by tracing down the original model on monitors? So, a lot of questions in debate. And considering the scope of the responsibilities of the conservator, the criteria to be put forward by the artists who produced the work are extremely important. So this is my final saying, the artist has a full responsibility in stating this. And I'm realizing that so many artists have nothing to do with that. They're not bothered about whether their artwork will remain in the long. They just wondered about the moment. But I think this is not what we have been building our civilization around it. So Bruce Sterling, as he noted, the digital art, even though it seems less physical than traditional art, doesn't mean that it has no physicality at all. So it might be a file, but again, it needs a media player, it needs a screen, it needs something else. And going through these discussions, I was invited for a talk by a museum, and I have talked about my concerns. And right after the concerns, we started this consortium and named it Technological Art Preservation Project. It took 2 years to finish. There were so many talks done. We made collaborations with Tate Modern in Britain, Rhizome, you might have heard, and ZKM in Karlsruhe. We invited a lot of scholars and artists and made discussions and talks. And then we released this book, 400 pages long. I'm one of the editors. And the good thing is, there are these articles, Conservation of Technological Artworks, like the software aspects of preserving digital art. It's good that I read this one because Cemal Yılmaz is a computer scientist. So we invited engineers and artists together to discuss this matter because this is a very interdisciplinary problem. Again, this is a computer scientist professor, surrogates and SAM, preserving virtual environments. How are we going to preserve the virtual environments? I hope these questions are producing some spikes in your mind. And I also prepared these interviews with the artists and asked same questions. Did you have you ever presented this piece? These are the artworks. And some of the questions I might remind saying, if it were to be presented 100 years ahead, what would you want it to be remained? What should we conserve from the piece? Okay, this is a very hypothetical questions. So this is a book, again, 400 pages. The nice thing is that you can download it. It's free. And I will share the slides. And it's soon to be printed at physical. And this was a project I did. I was able to finish as of last year. The book is published, but we're still working on to underline this problem, technological art preservation. Hey, museums, you should be taking this into more serious manner. Then I started thinking of, I have problems with this term, by the way, new media, because I believe the term new is a bit a risky term. It comes from the modernity. Modernity, if you have been familiar with, is kind of like avoids the past and deconstructs everything, and then thinks whatever new is amazing. And I believe the new media term has been evolved within the same philosophy. And I started thinking, what's new about new media? And who was the ancestors of today's technology? And more specifically, I started asking to myself, who were the generation of artists doing similar things before me? Okay, and then there was a name coming. So yeah, in this is where I live, in Turkey. There was a name coming into my front, but with no reference at all. It was this guy, Teoman Madra. There were just slight references saying Teoman Madra was doing some experimental media works in the 60s and 70s, but nothing else. And then I started excavating like a archaeologist, because in those times there were no publications done, and Teoman Madra is an unknown, super unknown person. But I knew the wife. He's a living artist, by the way, 93 years old. I knew the wife. She's a curator, and I said, I want to learn more about Teoman Madra because I want to see and investigate whether he might be the missing brick on the wall. Okay? Because we as artists, we believe what we do is something contemporary, but it's not a leap. It's not something that came out of the sky. So there's been something happened in the past. And then she invited me and said, there are some bunches of CDs you might want to check of his works. And I went there to check. It wasn't a bunch of CDs. It was thousands of CDs. And Teoman Madra, born in 1931, he's a photo and multimedia artist. No, that's wrong. He was not born in 1964. He was born in 1931. And he was making these projectors, analog, experimental, photographic, aesthetical experiments. And I also believe that he was a continuer of the idea of the fluxus. So he was heavily exhibiting works using very simple technological tools back in the 70s and 80s. I will show you some examples. And presenting these pieces along with some musical performances, just like we did today. But he was doing it with analog means. So I wanted to go and resurrect all these pieces because they were in analog formats. They were in CDs. I mean, this is a recent one. They were in. There's not much here, but they were in floppy. If you remember, there was a thing called floppy. They were in these USBs. Some of the things were in prints. So some of them were in photographs. So this is one work he has done. He did in the 60s. He was using long exposure to make photography, But I think this is not too far from what I was showing you earlier on. Okay, so I fully respect, and I wanted to bring this to the front and show people that there were these amazing things that has been done in the past. This is another work by him in the 60s and 70s again. Again, he was also using optical illusions with analog means, playing with some optical lenses. He has an Instagram page. I am in charge of the Instagram. This is a project I've been dealing with for about 2 years, and I converted all of his works into digital. It took me a year, and now that we have a database, but doesn't mean that every data is necessary. So we are at this phase of eliminating the unnecessary ones. So all of his photos doesn't mean that they have artistic approach. So at the end, I converted almost like 352 hours of video time. 15,000, I scanned them, negatives, dias, thousands of CDs and DVDs, but now they're in good hands. Because otherwise, these medias were about to die out. Now they remain in a cloud server. And the next thing on my agenda is I will present it in a few slides later on, have a book and put it in the history. Okay, put the missing stone in the right place. I have written an article on this with my assistant Begüm, and we submitted to this symposium, ICEA. This is going to be the first exposing of Teoman Madra's work to the large audiences, and it got accepted. We'll present it in Barcelona in June, and that's a success. And it tells about how the piece was preserved. And then another nice news about this project is that my assistant, Begüm, she's got accepted. She earned Erasmus funding for her internship study in 2 months for ZKM, which is a leading institution in archival research, and we will work on the archive. Still going on. There's a lot to do about this thing, and so my agenda in 2022 is, the audience asked if I could get rid of all these heavy schedule. I want to focus on this thing and then make the exhibition, which is indeed due December. And there's a nice museum. They accepted to exhibit his works, and there will be a publication of an artistic book. Thank you.